Bob Foster died forgotten, a boxing legend whose incredible story was buried beneath the weight of a few high-profile losses. This is the horrible tragedy of one of boxing's greatest champions, a man who dominated an entire division for 6 years, yet never received the recognition he deserved. But here's what makes this story even more heartbreaking. Bob Foster wasn't just good at boxing. He was absolutely dominant, a true king who ruled with devastating power and unmatched skill. Born on April 27, 1942 in Borger, Texas, Robert Wayne Foster moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where his boxing journey began. But it wasn't until he joined the United States Air Force that his talent truly emerged. During his 5 years of service, Foster became both a member and coach of the Air Force boxing team. This period shaped him into something special. He compiled an incredible amateur record of over 100 fights with only 3 losses. His achievements included winning the All Air Force Games and earning a silver medal at the 1959 Pan American Games in Chicago. Then came a moment that would define his entire career trajectory. Foster won the Olympic trials for the light heavyweight division for the 1960 Rome Olympics. But in a cruel twist of fate, was given to a young fighter named Cassius Clay, who would later become Muhammad Ali. Foster was offered a chance to compete as a middleweight instead, but he declined, stating he couldn't make the required weight drop. This early encounter with weight class limitations would become a recurring theme throughout his career. Foster turned professional in 1961, starting with a second-round knockout victory, but the road to a title shot proved frustrating. Opportunities were scarce, and the boxing business was complicated by politics and bureaucracy. In 1966, completely frustrated by the lack of chances, Foster took an entire year off from boxing. His career seemed to be stalling until he met a new manager named Joe Nesling. This partnership changed everything, but it came with strings attached. Nesling provided Foster with a monthly living allowance of $600 and a new car. However, there was one strange condition. Nesling warned Foster to deny any close relationship with him if ever questioned by the FBI. This arrangement provided the financial backing needed to navigate the complex business environment of professional boxing, but it also revealed the darker side of the sport during that era. The investment paid off when Foster finally got his shot at the light heavyweight title in 1968. His opponent was Dick Tiger, a formidable Hall of Fame champion who had been carefully protected by influential figures in the boxing world. Tiger was reluctant to face Foster, and for good reason. To force this fight to happen, Foster had to put up his own money. He guaranteed Tiger's purse with $100,000 of his own cash, which meant Foster actually lost money to win the world title. But what happened in the ring made every sacrifice worth it. Foster defeated Tiger by 4th-round knockout with a devastating left hook. This wasn't just any victory. It was the first time in Dick Tiger's long and distinguished career that he had been stopped inside the distance. With that single punch, Foster announced himself as a fearsome champion and one of the most dangerous punchers in boxing. What followed was 6 years of absolute dominance. From 1968 to 1974, Bob Foster ruled the light heavyweight division with complete authority. He successfully defended his title a record 14 times, setting a new standard for the division. His victories weren't just wins. They were statements of superiority, often punctuated by devastating knockouts that left opponents unconscious on the canvas. One of his most memorable performances came against Frankie DePaula. Foster was knocked down early in the fight, but he got up and knocked out DePaula in the first round. This rare feat of being knocked down and then scoring a knockout in the same round of a world title fight demonstrated Foster's incredible heart and power. Another legendary moment came when he knocked out Mike Quarry with what witnesses described as a vicious left hook that became the stuff of boxing folklore. During his prime years as light heavyweight champion, Foster suffered only one loss within his division, and that was to Mauro Mina from Peru. His dominance was so complete that he made every other contender look ordinary. The only other blemish on his light heavyweight record was a controversial draw with Jorge Ahumada in 1974, a result that initially prompted his retirement from the sport. But here's where Foster's story takes a complex turn. Despite his overwhelming success at light heavyweight, he made 2 decisions that would forever change how people remembered his career. Foster chose to challenge the heavyweight champions of his era, first Joe Frazier in 1970 and then Muhammad Ali in 1972. These weren't foolish decisions. They were calculated risks driven by ambition and the pursuit of greater financial rewards. The physical reality, however, was brutal. At 6 feet 3 inches tall with a 79-inch reach, Foster was an imposing light heavyweight, but his body just did not cooperate when he tried to gain weight for heavyweight fights. Against Joe Frazier, Foster weighed only 188 pounds while Frazier came in at 209 pounds. The 21-pound difference might not sound like much, but in professional boxing, every pound matters exponentially. Foster's fighting style, which was perfectly suited for light heavyweights, became a liability against bigger opponents. His low-held lead hand and side-on stance created openings that heavyweight punchers could exploit. The low left hand was easily countered by a straight right, and his habit of bending bending forward at the waist to avoid punches left him perfectly positioned to be hit by rising hooks and uppercuts. Against Frazier, these vulnerabilities proved fatal. From the opening bell, the power difference was obvious. In the second round, Frazier landed a devastating left hook that sent Foster to the canvas. Foster struggled to his feet on what he later described as rubbery legs, only to be immediately met with another crushing left hook that ended the fight. Foster's own words captured the brutal reality of that night. He said the 2 rounds seemed like a year, and that facing Frazier was the closest you could come to facing death. 2 years later, Foster faced an even greater physical mismatch against Muhammad Ali. The weight disparity was extreme. Ali weighed a career-heavy 221 pounds, while Foster came in at just 180 pounds, creating a 41-pound difference. Despite this massive disadvantage, Foster showed incredible skill in the early rounds, out-jabbing the legendary Ali and accomplishing something no other fighter ever did. Foster opened a cut above Ali's left eye, the only time in Ali's entire professional career that he was cut by an opponent. This small victory seemed to anger Ali, who abandoned his typical jabbing style and unleashed a barrage of power punches. Foster was knocked down 4 times in the 5th round alone. Ali continued to use his massive size advantage to punish Foster, ultimately knocking him down 7 times before securing an 8th round knockout. While the defeat was definitive, the financial motivation was clear. Ali earned $250,000 while Foster received his largest purse to date at $125,000, still less than half of what Ali made. Here's what most people don't understand about these heavyweight losses. They weren't evidence of Foster's weakness or lack of skill. They were the predictable result of extreme physical mismatches that no amount of technique could overcome. Foster was fighting men who outweighed him by 20 to 40 pounds, men who were naturally bigger, stronger, and more powerful. The real tragedy isn't that Foster lost these fights. The tragedy is that these defeats overshadowed his incredible achievements as a light heavyweight champion. During the late 1960s and early 1970s, the heavyweight division was a cultural phenomenon that transcended boxing. Muhammad Ali's fights were broadcast to global audiences of hundreds of millions, becoming major social and political events. No other weight class could compete with the public's fascination with heavyweight boxing. Foster's relative lack of mainstream recognition wasn't due to inferior competition or lack of skill. It was a systematic consequence of a media landscape that was almost exclusively focused on heavyweight boxing. The massive purses, international attention, and cultural significance of heavyweight fights created a reality where all other divisions were relegated to secondary status. Foster's professional career officially ended in 1978 after a brief comeback resulted in 2 knockout losses. His decision to retire permanently was conscious and wise. In his own words, he was tired of boxing and didn't want to end up like Ali. This statement, made long before the full extent of Ali's physical decline became apparent, showed Foster's awareness of the toll boxing could take on a fighter's body and mind. Following retirement, Foster dedicated himself to a career he had maintained throughout much of his professional boxing life. His nickname, the Deputy Sheriff, wasn't just a moniker. It reflected his real job. Foster worked for the Albuquerque Police Department for 23 years, from 1971 to 1994, retiring with the rank of sergeant. His post-boxing life was one of service and stability, a stark contrast to the turbulent lives of many former champions. Bob Foster was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 1990 and ranked as the 3rd greatest light heavyweight in history by the Ring magazine. These honors recognized what boxing insiders always knew. Foster wasn't a flawed champion whose record was tarnished by heavyweight losses. He was a specialist who demonstrated a rare combination of destructive punching power and tactical brilliance within his division. His defeats to Ali and Frazier don't diminish his legacy. Instead, they highlight the immense courage and ambition it took for a light heavyweight champion to step into the ring with 2 of the most physically imposing and skilled heavyweights in history. Foster's story isn't one of failure. It's the story of a king who ruled his domain with absolute authority, a master craftsman who chose to test his skills in a different arena for both professional and financial reasons. Bob Foster's rightful place in boxing history isn't as an appendage to the heavyweight giants of his era. He was a king in his own right, the undisputed ruler of the light heavyweight division, whose 6-year reign was more dominant than most heavyweight champions could claim. His legacy should be remembered not for the nights he fell to bigger men, but for the countless nights he stood tall as the most feared puncher at 175 pounds.